There we go. Wait. Oh, man, I thought the music was going to stay on. Bear with me. It's a good one. Do you like Frank Sinatra? My, my grandmother, my my grandmother, my father's mother, she loved Frank. Like to a degree that it's definitely possible that she's making love to Frank Sinatra in hell. So, this particular song I resonate with. You know what? Let's put that on again. Because which song? Hello. My Way. I was always a fan of the Sex Pistols version. Secondly was the Sid Vicious version, but no need to split hairs over it. I like the Frank one. So when it comes on shuffle mode, it makes me feel good inside. When I was a kid, when I was small, my mommy used to have me watch Sesame Street. I love Sesame Street. I love Sesame Street. I love the Muppets. Thank you. Appreciate. But there was one sketch on Sesame Street that still to this day, like I feel like it resonates with. Well, let me rephrase that. I can see how it played its part. God damn it. Oh. In developing to develop me into the person I am today, you know? It doesn't. But just languishing in this song. Yes, bear with me. But well, God, I fucking love this song. It's like fucking magic to my ears. Oh, God. That feels so good. So, when I was but a wee man pup, my mommy used to sit me in front of the TV to watch Sesame Street when it was on. And you know, for the life of me, there's not too much I remember. I mean, I know the basics. But what stands out to me most is one sketch that personally for me, it kind of set the ball in motion for the man that I would eventually evolve into. Now, you can find it on YouTube, there's videos of it on YouTube. And watching it as an adult, it's actually pretty goddamn creepy. A lot creepier than I remember as a child, but those were different times. It was a video of a bunch of little children being undressed. Well, undressing themselves and putting their jammies on. But there was a song that was playing. And the song was, "I Can Do It By Myself." As I recount my life in my mind, and actually allow myself to go back to that place and kind of take the roller coaster ride down the time stream of my life, I can reflect back on how much of an impact that song and that video had on every single thing I did moving forward. Now, I'm not gonna bullshit that there's not a sense of codependency in my life. I'm still codependent on my mom. I'm still codependent on people. Although, over these past few years, I've noticed how that sense of codependency, which I detest, but how that sense of codependency is actually the fuel for the fire that keeps alive that part of myself that strives for sovereignty. And not just sovereignty from mommy. That's a big one. We can only live in mommy's womb for so long before get the fuck out. I know you want to stay up there, but, and ironically, like this is popping into my head about, ironically, not ironically, how I used to laugh at my wife and her sister and thinking how the two of them are never going to be satisfied until they can get right back up in that thing. And I'm talking about their mom's vagina. So it's funny to me to see how how my thoughts and my words really turn themselves around on me so that I too could find myself crawling back up my mommy's vagina. Because it's cold and scary outside. And there's predators everywhere. Now, as a young babe, I could see why I wouldn't be aware of those things. At least not consciously. But as I've evolved over time and learned to get a taste of the world around me, at least, I could see how my youthful ignorance blinded me to the harsh reality that everyone is a predator. May deny it, may kind of skirt around it and put a mask on. Wolves in sheep's clothing. And how it's important in today's world to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, because you either eat or you get eaten. Or I don't think there's any other way. You have the consumer class, the consumer race, who double up as those who are consumed. But even the consumers of the consumers are themselves consumed. I did myself the favor of listening to an unabridged version of Animal Farm today, which is one of my favorite books. I have one of my favorite books. A Brave New World's coming to mind. It's been a while. It's been a while since I indulged Huxley. But at the same time, I could see how revisiting A Brave New World could be advantageous for me. I was just writing a little bit before I came out here, and we were talking about Animal Farm and some of the inspired ideas that were coming from it. Which also led me back to another book I'm listening to, Darth Plagueis, which harkened back to a book I haven't read in a while, which I would like to listen to sooner than later, Path of Destruction by Darth Bane. If you've never read Darth Bane, but you're familiar with Star Wars, Darth Bane is the Sith Lord who initiated the Rule of Two, which came into being after he used guile and subterfuge to infiltrate the Sith Order at the time so as to, for all intents and purposes, plant a bomb right at the core of their organization, of their cult, of their system. It was called a thought bomb. It was an ancient Sith technology that Bane had uncovered while on a search for deeper truths and hidden mysteries within the ancestry of the Sith Order. And he came across this one artifact that opened his eyes to this Sith magic called a thought bomb. It was an incredibly destructive force that had the potential to tear the very fabric of reality apart. Now, when Bane was still training, when he was still learning the ways of the Force, despite the recommendations of his peers, he had a tendency of being drawn to ancient documents and old teachings that came from the ancient times. This did not bode well, as his perceived superiors had a tendency of expressing their disapproval of what he was doing. Why are you wasting your time with all those old documents and texts? There's nothing to learn from those. The failures of the past are what bred this new order. We have no use for that. But they kept them around. Probably for the same reason that people love to hoard antiques. See, but Bane had a vision. Maybe not a vision. The vision was forming. But he was a believer because he was still fresh to the ways of the Force and the Sith. And considering his background and what led to him being recruited by this organization, is what made him different. He took it upon himself to free himself. He broke down his shackles. He unchained himself. Because it eventually became apparent to him that he was holding the keys to his chains the whole time. And because of a series of synchronistic happenings, he found himself in a position to break his own chains. And be it to his ignorance in the Force, unlike his contemporaries, he had this uncanny ability to see outside of the box. Now, because of his tenure in with the group, his ideas were typically mocked and shit on by everybody else. But he saw this opportunity as just that, an opportunity to do something extraordinary. So he eventually left the organization. See, in the old times, the Sith had a tendency of naming them. They would give themselves titles, like Darth. During Bane's time, the new Sith Order, they did away with that. No more titles. No more using the word Darth. It's a abbreviation for Dark Lord of the Sith. So once he titled himself Darth Bane, this kind of sends some ripples through the organization, and he kind of had to go, which he was already planning on doing because he started to see the incompetence of upper management, their contradictory behavior, how they were modeling themselves after a rival organization. He started to see how they were resembling more like the Jedi. So he went on a search. He went traveling to find the hidden secrets that were said to not be there. Because he was wise in that he didn't just take someone's word for it. It's one of those, I have to see it to believe it for myself type of people. I can appreciate that. I have to do it on my own. So in his journey, he stumbled across the teachings of several ancient Sith lords from the past who taught him, in their way, how they saw things. They allowed him to see through their eyes. Because he understood and respected the past, and to some, you can argue that the past is dead. It holds no value. If the past had value, it would still exist today. And in a sense, it does. In written form, visual form, audio form. But just because the failures of the past led to what we see today doesn't mean you can't take a new look at the past with the eyes of the future. And it's not saying to emulate the past, but to learn from it and see pieces of the bigger puzzle from a much more expansive perspective. Because it's one thing for someone to tell you about the past, it's another thing for the past to tell you about itself. I'll give you an example. So a few years back, maybe last year, actually, but the enticement to explore this particular version of history came years back. It wasn't until last year that I finally committed myself to doing so. And what I did was, I picked up Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. World's most wickedest man, aside from Aleister Crowley. Now, why would one want to read Adolf Hitler? What is there to gain from understanding the mind of a madman, an evil dictator? Exactly. What is there to learn from it? Especially when everybody's already telling you, bad news. Don't get involved in that. That's evil. But now, what if that hidden within the evils of the past, that there's actually solutions for the evils happening today? Insights, perspectives, points of reference that are completely alien from the eye of the observer, but there in itself is the value of exploring the unspeakable past. How do you, I guess you could say, how do you prevent another Hitler from coming to power? Well, one way coming to my mind would be to understand how he thought in the first place. Now, this is just my own personal experience, but in doing so, and I'm not saying that I was reading it for the sake of preventing another Hitler from coming to power, but to see what it was that sparked him, to see what it was that fueled him. And we can go off popular theory. It's just a hatred for the Jews. To me personally, it seems more like a dislike, but I never met the man in person. And the few bits that I've read so far that had mentioned anything about Judaism, it's more of a distaste. And I guess from an ignorant perspective, because he was ignorant, it's one thing to shit on the people that you don't like. It's another thing to learn from them and see what it is that makes them tick. But that's not for everybody. Sometimes it's easier just to demonize that which we hate instead of trying to understand it, to see how we have created an imaginary enemy in our head based on ignorant biases. And even contradiction. Because even Hitler, I don't think he took his own advice as succinctly as he could have. Early in the book, he's talking about his younger self and some of his exploits, and how he would visit the Weimar Senate just to observe, to see how politics actually worked, instead of just emulating his peers and demonizing one party over the other, or becoming a sycophant of one party over the other, but actually seeing what was the source that was behind the world that he found himself in. Why is the world the way it is? Who's responsible for this? And so he would just go and observe. Nobody knew he was there. Nobody thought about it at the time. It's not like anybody would have thought, who's this young kid who's coming in here? Wait, I think he was probably in his 20s, if that. But he said something that struck me, that when I read it, which is when I thought to myself, how the fuck did everybody miss this? This is the greatest piece of logic that any would-be learner of any fucking subject contort and shape for themselves. And what did he say? He said, I'm not going to learn politics, but I will allow politics to teach me. So, this is when I had my own bright idea. Take out the word politics and insert anything else. Insert anything else in there. Example, I will not learn religion, but I will allow religion to teach me. I will not learn business, but I will allow business to teach me. I will not learn corporate politics, but I will allow corporate politics to teach me. Do you see where we're going with this? I will not learn programming, but I will allow programming to teach me. I will not learn cooking, culinary arts, but I will allow the culinary arts to teach me. I highly recommend, if you have masterclass, whether or not you want to be a culinary artist or not, I would highly recommend watching Chef Gordon Ramsay's lecture on the culinary arts. I couldn't tell you a single fucking recipe that he shared with me, but the passion and fire and fuel that was raging that man on to make love to that fucking whole chicken like he did, it opened my eyes